Okay, let's unpack this. You ever feel like you're just spinning your wheels with good intentions?
Oh, definitely.
You set a goal, maybe it's a New Year thing or a big work project,
Yeah.
or just finally trying to tackle that thing you keep putting off,
Yeah, you start out all fired up.
full of energy. And then, well, the wheels wobble, right? Life happens. Or maybe just that initial buzz kind of fades.
hmm
It's that gap, isn't it? That space between saying, I want to, and actually, getting it done.
It really is. And what's interesting, I think, is how the usual advice is all about like willpower or just pushing through.
Grit.
Yeah, grit. But behavioral science, it shows us there's a lot more going on under the hood. It gives us some pretty surprising clues about why we fall short and, more importantly, how we can actually build better ways to succeed.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we're going to skip the usual motivational slogans, and really dive headfirst into the actual science of achieving things. The mission here is basically to give you, the listener, tools, actionable stuff based on evidence from psychology, cognitive science.
Real frameworks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about setting goals.
Yeah.
We're digging into the mechanics, the things that can help turn those hopes into, well, real results.
And if you kind of step back and look at the big picture, it's really a whole system we're exploring.
Sure.
We'll touch on the foundational ideas about what drives us, practical techniques you can literally start using right away.
Today.
Yeah, today. And even understanding how our own brains sometimes, well, trick us, plus how the world around us shapes what we do.
All right, so let's start building that foundation. Why does just having a conscious goal actually, change our actions? What's the deal there?
Well, that takes us straight to the really groundbreaking work by Edwin Locke and Latham, their goal-setting theory.
The classic.
It really is. They basically showed that goals we consciously decide on are powerful drivers of what we do. And they identified 5 key principles that really determine how effective those goals are going to be.
Okay, let's hear them. What are these 5 things that make a goal actually work?
So the first one is commitment. And this isn't just like wishing for something. It's about your real dedication to it, your determination to stick with it, especially when things get tough. Now, what's really interesting about commitment, it's not just about how badly you want the outcome.
Yeah.
Your belief in your ability to actually pull it off, that's self-efficacy. We'll talk more about that later. It plays a huge part.
Okay.
Even a goal you really, really desire might not get strong commitment if deep down you just don't think you can actually achieve it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like, I might want to climb Everest, but if I feel like I can barely walk upstairs, that commitment isn't really there.
Exactly. The perceived ability is key.
So what's principle number 2?
Second is clarity.
Yeah.
Vague goals are just surprisingly useless.
Okay.
Locke and Latham really stressed this. Goals need to be clear, specific, unambiguous. So instead of, I want to be healthier,
Which is super vague.
a clear goal is something like, I will eat 1 serving of vegetables with lunch and dinner 5 days a week.
Much sharper.
Right. That kind of specificity gives you a clear path that helps you understand what to do, boosts motivation because you see progress, and, makes it more satisfying. It's like giving your brain really precise instructions.
Got it. No more fuzzy targets. We need laser focus. Number 3.
Number 3, goals need to be challenging, but attainable. There's a sweet spot here.
Okay.
Goals that are too easy, well, they don't really pull us in, do they? They don't give you that buzz of accomplishment.
Right. No satisfaction.
And interestingly, neuroscience suggests that goals that are moderately challenging actually light up the brain's reward system. You get that dopamine hit.
The good stuff.
Yeah. But, and this is really important, they also have to feel like they're actually possible. A super hard goal without any clarity where you're like, where do I even start?
Yeah.
That just leads to frustration.
Hey, you just shut down.
Exactly. It kills your commitment. So it's finding that perfect level tricky enough to be interesting, but not so hard it feels
The
impossible.
Goldilocks zone of goals. Not too hard, not too soft.
Got it.
Okay. Oh, but what if the goal itself is just inherently complicated? Lots of moving parts.
That's principle number 4, task complexity. When you're dealing with really intricate goals, It's super easy to feel overwhelmed.
Totally.
Locke and Latham saw this. For these kinds of goals, you absolutely need realistic timelines. You need built-in points to stop and reassess how things are going.
Checkpoints.
Checkpoints, exactly. And you need to be flexible enough to change your strategy as you learn more. If you just try to, like, brute force a complex goal without those things, it's incredibly demotivating.
Because just staring at this giant, messy goal feels impossible, like trying to eat an elephant in one bite.
Yeah.
You need those moments to pause,
Yeah.
figure things out, maybe change direction a bit.
Precisely. And that brings us to the fifth principle, feedback.
Crucial.
Absolutely essential. You need ways to track your progress. That could be feedback from other people or just your own honest self-assessment.
Okay.
Feedback is like your GPS. It tells you if you're heading the right way, if your current efforts are working, and where you might need to, make a course correction. Goals and feedback, they work together. It's this continuous loop that keeps you motivated and moving forward. And it all ties back to that commitment thing and believing you can actually do it.
Okay, so that's the classic goal-setting theory. Really foundational stuff. But you mentioned another layer, the behavioral goal-setting theory. How does that build on Locke and Latham?
Exactly. So while Locke and Latham were really focused on the qualities of good goals, the behavioral goal-setting theory, especially someone like Rashmad talks about this, it shifts the focus. It's about defining goals in terms of specific, observable behaviors.
Okay. So less about the big outcome, more about the actual actions you need to take consistently.
You got it. It's less get promoted and more complete these specific tasks weekly that lead to promotion.
So instead of I want to lose weight, it's defining the exact exercise routines or the dietary habits I need to do every day or week.
Precisely. This theory really highlights how important it is to be actively involved in setting these behavior-focused goals yourself. And then you need to rigorously track whether you're actually doing them.
Makes sense.
So the main ideas are set specific, realistic behavioral targets. Create really clear action plans that how you'll do those behaviors.
Right.
And then consistently monitor and get feedback on how you're doing with those actions. And that feedback then helps you tweak your strategy. It creates that dynamic, adaptive loop we talked about.
Yeah, it feels much more grounded. You're turning that abstract want into concrete things you do each day.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's powering all of this? The engine behind it all. Got to be motivation, right?
Absolutely. Motivation is that psychological juice that gets us going and keeps us pointed towards our goals. And what's really cool is that just the act of setting clear, challenging goals can itself be a huge motivator. It can even boost your commitment to, say, your team or a bigger project.
Interesting.
And a massive piece of this puzzle is self-efficacy. We mentioned it before. It's that core belief you have in your own ability to succeed at a specific task or goal.
That inner, yeah, I can handle this feeling.
That's it, exactly. And it sets up this amazing positive cycle.
How so?
Well, when you achieve something, even a small goal, your self-efficacy gets a little boost.
Right.
And that increased belief then fuels your motivation to take on something a bit bigger, a bit more challenging.
Like building confidence momentum.
Precisely. And if we think about the types of motivation, science often talks about intrinsic versus extrinsic. Okay. Intrinsic is that internal drive, right? Doing something because you enjoy it, it feels meaningful, it lines up with your values. Extrinsic is doing something for an external reward, like money, or to avoid punishment.
Gotcha.
And for goals that take time, that need sustained effort, tapping into that intrinsic motivation, connecting your goals to what you genuinely care about, your purpose, that's incredibly powerful, way more sustainable than just chasing external rewards.
Okay, that gives us a really solid grasp of the why behind effective goals. Now let's get down to brass tacks. How do we actually build these goals? Let's kick off with the big one. SMART goals. We all kind of know the acronym, but what's the behavioral science saying about why each part matters?
Right. SMART. It's definitely everywhere, and for good reason. It gives you that clear checklist. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Let's break down the science behind each one.
Okay, hit me with S. Why specific? We touched on this with clarity, but dive deeper.
Specificity basically cuts through the fog. When a goal is specific, it sharpens your brain's focus. It tells your mind exactly where to direct its resources. Your brain gets a clear target, the outcome feels more real, easier to picture. Think of it like giving your internal GPS precise coordinates instead of just saying head north.
Okay, makes perfect sense. Navigation needs specifics. What about measurable?
Measurable is all about tracking. It lets you see objectively how you're doing.
Right, the feedback loop again.
Exactly, which we know reinforces the behaviors you want. Seeing concrete proof that you're making progress, that triggers dopamine.
The reward chemical.
Yep. That little hit of reward keeps you motivated. It's like having a progress bar that shows you, hey, look how far you've come. Keep going.
I like that visual. Okay, achievable.
Achievable is about finding that crucial balance between shooting high and keeping it real,
Okay.
between aspiration and self-efficacy. Goals that feel totally impossible just kill your motivation, right? They can even cause stress. An achievable goal sits in that sweet spot. It stretches you, it's engaging, but it still feels like you can actually do it.
So it keeps you in the game.
It keeps your brain optimally engaged, not bored because it's too easy, not overwhelmed because it's too hard.
Right, that stimulating challenge we can actually meet. Got it. Next up, are relevant.
Relevance plugs directly into intrinsic motivation, that internal drive we just talked about.
Yeah.
When a goal connects with your bigger values, your interests, your overall life direction, the whole process just feels more meaningful, more engaging.
Because it matters to you.
Exactly. It clicks with your core why. That activates emotional parts of your brain and really strengthens your commitment. It connects those daily actions to a bigger picture purpose.
And finally, T time bound. Why the deadline?
Having a deadline creates a sense of urgency. It forces you to prioritize.
Lights a little fire under you.
Kind of, yeah. It boosts accountability, too. And it helps your brain figure out how to allocate its energy and resources effectively to hit that target date. It's like setting your arrival time for a trip. It makes you plan the journey properly.
So SMART really provides this solid structure for planning. No wonder it's used everywhere. Personal life, business. And you mentioned research backs it up, that Michigan State study.
Absolutely. That study really highlighted the difference. People who wrote down their goals, made specific action plans, and tracked their progress, basically following SMART principles, were significantly more successful than those who didn't.
Wow, like how much more successful?
The numbers were pretty stark, something like 76% success versus only 43% for those with unwritten goals. The structure, the progress awareness, boosting self-efficacy, it all contributes. That's why it's also useful in things like therapy for changing health habits.
But it's not a silver bullet, is it? I feel like there are times when SMART might actually hold you back.
That's a really important point. It's not perfect for every situation. Some critics argue that the strong focus on specifics and often shorter-term targets can sometimes stifle creativity or innovation.
Right, if you need to explore or figure things out as you go.
Exactly. There's even research, meta-analyses suggesting that for really creative tasks or when you're first learning something complex, a vaguer do-your-best goal might actually be better.
Really? Why is that?
Because the rigidity of SMART in those contexts can sometimes make people anxious, less willing to experiment or deviate from the plan, even if a better approach emerges. So, yeah, SMART's effectiveness really depends on the context.
Okay, so great tool for clear execution, maybe less ideal for exploration or really complex learning curves. Good to know. Now let's switch gears to WOP. Sounds fun, but it seems like a more internal psychological approach. Tell us about WOP.
WOOP is fascinating. It stands for Wish, Outcome, Obstacle, Plan. It was developed by Gabriel Oettingen, and it takes a really interesting approach. It encourages positive thinking about your goals, but crucially, it also forces you to realistically confront the internal hurdles that might get in your way.
So it's not just fluffy positive thinking. It's positive thinking plus a reality check about yourself.
Precisely. That's the key difference. So first step is the wish. This is, your goal needs to be specific, meaningful to you, challenging, but still feel feasible. Like with SMART, clarity and realism matter here.
Okay, define the wish. Then what?
Then the outcome. You vividly imagine the best possible result of achieving that wish, really immerse yourself in how it would feel, the benefits. This visualization actually activates brain areas linked to emotion, motivation, reward.
Okay, fueling the fire with positive imagery. I get that. What's next? This is where it gets different, right?
This is the crucial WOOP twist. Step 3 is identifying your main obstacle. And this is critical, it's not about external problems like a lack of time or resources. It's about the internal stuff.
Inside your own head.
Exactly. Those ingrained thoughts, feelings, habits within you. Things like self-doubt, procrastination habits, fear of failure, maybe a skill gap you haven't addressed, things that are within your control to change.
Wow. Okay. That's a sharp turn inward, looking for the self-sabotage potential.
That's a great way to put it. And the final step is the plan. You create specific if-then plans, implementation intentions designed specifically to tackle those internal obstacles you just identified.
So, like, if I feel that urge to procrastinate, then I will.
Work on the task for just 5 minutes. Or if I start doubting myself, then I will recall 3 past successes. You're building preemptive strategies for your own internal roadblocks.
Mental contingency plans. I like it.
Mm.
So what's the core magic here? Why does this work better than just thinking positively?
The core mechanism is called mental contrasting. You're actively comparing and contrasting that desired future, the outcome, with your present reality, including those internal obstacles. And study after study shows this mental contrasting process drives goal pursuit much more effectively than positive visualization alone. It gives you a more balanced view. It engages the parts of your brain dealing with expectations versus reality. It makes your commitment more grounded.
And it works in real life. You mentioned students.
Oh yeah, tons of applications. Studies show WOOP helps students put in more effort, finish homework, attend class more, even get better grades.
Wow.
But it's super versatile. People use it for personal development, learning new skills, tackling phobias like public speaking, reading more, hitting health goals. One study showed people nearly doubled their physical activity using WOOP
That's impressive.
because it directly tackles things like being overly optimistic or falling for the planning fallacy that obstacle step forces realism. And the plan step integrates those powerful if-then implementation intentions we'll talk more about. WOOP really connects the why, the wish, and outcome with the what if, the obstacle, and the how to overcome the plan. It links motivation and problem solving directly to action.
That sounds incredibly useful for those goals where we are our own biggest hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
So if we compare SMART and WOOP side by side, what's the takeaway? When use which?
Well, think of SMART as being brilliant for bringing structure and precision, especially when the goal is pretty clear and execution is key. It's great for project management, tracking progress, getting things done efficiently.
Okay.
WOOP, on the other hand, really shines for maybe more complex goals, or especially those where, psychological barriers, procrastination, fear, self-doubt are likely to be the main issue. It's fantastic for building motivation, strengthening commitment, and driving behavior change by tackling those self-regulation challenges head on.
So WOOP digs a bit deeper into the internal stuff.
Yeah, identifying those obstacles in WOOP forces a level of introspection that just setting a SMART goal might not. It gets at a potentially deeper layer of what might stop you.
Really helpful distinction. Okay, we've mentioned them a few times now, implementation intentions, these if-then plans. Let's really zoom in. What makes them such powerful tools for closing that gap between wanting to do something and actually doing it?
Right. Implementation intentions. They're basically those pre-planned responses to specific situations. The structure is always, if situation X happens, then I will perform behavior Y.
Simple structure.
Very simple but powerful. The if part identifies the cue, the time, the place, the preceding event. The then part spells out the exact goal-directed action you'll take. And these usually serve a larger goal you have.
Give me an example again.
Sure. If it's 5 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, then I will immediately change into my workout clothes and go to the gym. Or if the waiter offers dessert, then I will order a coffee instead.
Okay, so you're creating these automatic links in your brain, like a shortcut from the trigger to the action.
That's exactly it. The power comes from forging a strong mental link between that specific cue and your intended response. It helps automate the behavior. It reduces the need for conscious thought or willpower in that moment. When the cue happens, the response is already primed. It takes some of the mental effort out of starting and sticking with the action. Less deliberation needed.
And the science supports this. You mentioned a big effect size.
Hugely supportive research. That meta-analysis showed a really strong positive effect equals 0.65, which is substantial in social science. They're proven to help people actually start doing things they intend to do.
Go.
They also help shield you from distractions once you've started, help you switch gears if one approach isn't working, and they even seem to conserve your mental energy.
Well,
That exercise example is real people with specific when and where plans are about twice as likely to follow through. They work for health habits, voting, managing emotions. There's even potential for helping with self-regulation challenges like ADHD.
so how do we craft really good ones? What's the recipe?
First, you need that clear overall goal. Then you brainstorm a specific if-then statements. Really visualize the situations where you might struggle or when the opportunity to act arises. Be specific about both the if and the then.
Anticipate the hurdles.
Exactly. They're particularly good for tackling procrastination and just plain forgetting. But, and this is important, they work best when you actually care about the underlying goal.
Right.
They boost execution, but they don't create motivation out of thin air. They're a tool to help you follow through on intentions you already have.
Okay, great tool for the execution
Yeah.
phase. Now, we often set these big, ambitious goals that can feel huge, daunting even. What's the trick to making them seem less overwhelming and more doable? I'm guessing breaking them down.
You nailed it. Big, hairy, audacious goals can feel so massive they actually paralyze you. They can kill motivation before you even start. The key is absolutely to break them down. Decompose them into smaller, much more manageable sub-goals, mini-tasks even.
Why does that work so well? What's going on in our heads when we chop up a big goal?
Several things, actually, on a cognitive and even neurological level. First, it just reduces the cognitive load.
Makes it easier to think about.
Yeah, our brains handle smaller, distinct tasks much better. It prevents that feeling of being swamped where your prefrontal cortex just throws its hands up.
Nice.
Second, every time you tick off a sub-goal, it's a mastery experience. We talked about this with self-efficacy. Each small win builds your confidence, reinforces your belief that you're making progress.
Right, building that momentum.
Exactly. Third, those frequent small wins, they trigger dopamine release, little bursts of reward. That creates a much more sustainable pattern of motivation than waiting for one giant reward at the very end. It's like a success spiral.
I like that. Success spiral.
Yeah, it trains your brain to connect effort with feeling good, which helps build that intrinsic motivation over time. And neurologically, taking consistent small steps actually helps rewire neural pathways, making related actions easier in the future. Small steps are literally how habits are built. And finally, just having a clear roadmap of smaller steps makes it easier to focus. It tells you what to do right now, which cuts down on procrastination that comes from ambiguity.
So it's all about creating those achievable mini milestones to build momentum and confidence. When we're framing these smaller sub-goals, how should we think about wording them for maximum effect?
Two key ideas here. First, try to frame them as approach goals. Focus on moving towards something positive rather than avoiding something negative.
Example.
Instead of stop checking social media during work hours, frame it as complete one focused work block of 60 minutes before checking social media. Approach goals tend to trigger more positive feelings and keep you engaged.
Okay, focus on the positive action. What's the second idea?
Frame them as mastery goals when possible. This means focusing on learning, developing skills, improving your understanding, rather than just hitting a performance target.
So understand the key concepts in this chapter rather than just read the chapter.
Exactly. Mastery goals are linked to higher self-efficacy, better problem solving, and more persistence. Why? Because if you hit a snag, you see it as part of the learning process, not just a failure.
Ah, that's key for resilience.
Absolutely. Especially for long, challenging goals where setbacks are pretty much guaranteed. That mastery focus helps you stay in the game.
Okay, fantastic. So we've got these powerful ways to set goals, break them down, plan our actions. But let's be real. Our brains aren't always perfectly rational computers, are they?
Not even close.
We fall into these mental traps, these cognitive biases that can completely derail even the best plans. Let's talk about these pitfalls.
Absolutely. Our brains use mental shortcuts, heuristics all the time. They're usually efficient, but they can lead to systematic errors in how we judge things, especially when planning for the future.
Yeah.
Just recognizing these biases exist is the huge first step to maybe counteracting them a bit. And it's worth noting they often cluster together. One bias can feed into another.
Like a domino effect of bad judgment.
Sort of, yeah. Like, if you're overly optimistic about how long a project will take, that's optimism bias.
Right.
You'll likely underestimate the work involved. That's the planning fallacy. Then, if you hit delays, you might only look for info confirming your original rosy view. That's confirmation bias. See how they link up.
Yikes. Okay, so what are some of the really common biases we should watch out for when we're setting and pursuing goals?
Well, we just mentioned the planning fallacy and optimism bias. We consistently underestimate time, cost, effort, and overestimate the benefits or our chances of success.
Guilty as charged. How do we fight that?
Breaking tasks down into tiny pieces helps a lot. Looking at how long similar things actually took in the past, using real data, not just gut feeling.
Be realistic.
Using WOOP's obstacle step forces you to think about what could go wrong. Building in buffer time, getting an outside perspective, ask someone else. Or do a premortem. Imagine it failed. Why did it fail?
Okay, good practical tips. What else?
Then there's present bias. also called hyperbolic discounting. This is huge. We strongly prefer smaller, immediate rewards over larger, delayed ones. It's why procrastination is so tempting.
The cookie now versus the beach body later.
Exactly. To fight this, things like automating behaviors help setting up automatic savings transfers, for instance. Breaking goals into tiny steps with very short deadlines gives you more frequent rewards. Visual reminders of the long-term goal. Commitment devices, which we'll get to. Even just imposing a short waiting period before indulging can sometimes break the spell.
Present bias feels like a constant battle. What other gremlins are in our heads?
Loss aversion. This is a big one discovered by Kahneman and Tversky. We feel the pain of a loss much more strongly, about twice as strongly than the pleasure of an equivalent game.
So losing $10 feels worse than finding $10 feels good.
Precisely. This can make us too cautious, afraid to take reasonable risks for our goals. Framing goals as gains helps focus on what you'll achieve, not what you'll avoid losing. WOOP's positive outcome visualization helps here too. And reframing setbacks as learning experiences instead of losses can soften the blow.
Okay, what else?
Overconfidence bias. Thinking we're better than we are, underestimating challenges. Again, seeking honest, objective feedback is key. Breaking goals down helps ground your estimates. WOOP's obstacle step forces some realism, just pausing to reflect. Am I being truly realistic here?
Maybe that dose of humility.
And related is confirmation bias. We actively seek out and favor information that confirms what we already believe, and we ignore or dismiss evidence that contradicts it.
The echo chamber effect.
Totally. To counter this, you have to deliberately seek out different views. Play devil's advocate against your own plan. Set objective criteria for success before you start so you can't move the goalposts later. Have systematic ways to review evidence.
It sounds like fighting these biases requires real conscious effort to challenge yourselves. Any other major ones?
Oh yeah. The sunk cost effect, or sunk cost fallacy. This is sticking with something, a project, a strategy, even a career path, just because you've already invested so much time, effort, or money into it.
Even if it's clearly not working out.
Exactly. Even if stopping and switching would be the rational choice based on future potential. To beat this, you need predefined exit points. Decide in advance. Under what conditions will we pull the plug? Focus only on future costs and benefits. Ignore the past investment. Get advice from someone objective who isn't emotionally invested. Frame quitting not as failure, but as freeing up resources for something better.
Letting go is hard, but sometimes necessary. Okay, one more.
Let's mention the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is the quirky finding that people with low competence in an area often overestimate their ability, while people with high competence sometimes underestimate theirs.
So the unskilled are unaware of it, and the skilled assume it's easy for everyone.
Pretty much. The antidote here is fostering a culture where honest feedback is normal, emphasizing continuous learning. Developing metacognition, the ability to accurately judge your own understanding and skills through reflection. Getting specific behavior-based feedback helps ground everyone's self-assessment. And again, frameworks like WOOP and using implementation intentions can act as bias interrupters because they force you into that more deliberate, analytical System 2 thinking rather than just relying on gut feelings.
Oh, it really is a cognitive minefield out there.
Yeah.
But just knowing about these biases gives us a fighting chance to spot them in ourselves. Now, woven through all of this discussion, commitment, attainability, resilience, is this idea of belief in ourselves. Let's really unpack the role of self-efficacy.
Absolutely. Self-efficacy is fundamental. Again, it's your belief in your own capability to perform the specific actions needed to reach a specific goal. It's different from general self-esteem, which is more about your overall sense of self-worth.
Okay. And it influences pretty much everything.
It has a huge impact. Your level of self-efficacy influences the types of goals you choose in the first place.
Higher efficacy, bigger goals.
Generally, yes. You're more likely to take on challenges if you believe you can handle them. It also affects your commitment level. Stronger belief leads to stronger commitment.
Makes sense.
And critically, it influences the effort you put in and how long you persist when you hit obstacles. Someone with high self-efficacy sees a setback as something to overcome, not a reason to quit.
They believe they can figure it out.
Exactly. They're also more likely to use effective strategies and adapt better when things go wrong. They tend to attribute failure to factors they can change, like effort or strategy, rather than fixed ability. And ultimately, higher self-efficacy is consistently linked to better outcomes in school, at work, in health behaviors. You name it.
Okay, so it's clearly vital. How do we actually build it up? Where does it come from? Can we cultivate it?
Definitely. It's not fixed. The most powerful source by far is mastery experiences.
Those small wins again?
Exactly. Successfully completing tasks, especially challenging ones, is the best way to build that belief. That's why breaking big goals down is so critical. It creates opportunities for mastery.
Well, what else built it?
Vicarious experiences. Seeing other people who are similar to you succeed at something can boost your belief that you can do it too. Role models matter.
Hmm.
Verbal persuasion. Getting genuine encouragement and constructive feedback from credible sources. Hearing, you can do this, here's why, from someone you trust can make a real difference.
Words matter.
They do. And finally, how you interpret your own emotional and physiological states. If you feel anxious before a presentation, do you interpret that as, I'm going to fail, or I'm energized and ready? Learning to reframe those feelings can impact self-efficacy. Feeling positive and energized generally helps.
So creating chances for success, finding role models, getting good feedback, managing our internal state. What else can we actively do?
Well, peer modeling is powerful. Seeing your peers succeed is often more impactful than seeing an expert succeed. Also, giving people choice and control over their goals and how they pursue them enhances their sense of competence. Feeling autonomous boosts efficacy.
Right.
And remember, self-efficacy is like the bridge between your past achievement and your future efforts. All those good goal-setting techniques we've talked about, breaking things down, positive feedback, WOOP's visualization, they work partly because they build self-efficacy. They create mastery experiences and positive feelings.
Okay, this is great. We're setting smart goals, tackling biases, building belief. Now, how do we keep the momentum going? How do we make these positive changes stick for the long haul?
Right, sustainability. This is where reinforcement theory comes into play again. The basic idea, behaviors followed by positive consequences are more likely to be repeated.
Skinner and his pigeons.
Sort of, yeah, but applied to our own goals. And a key aspect here is framing. We touched on it earlier, but focusing on gains promotion goals is generally more motivating than focusing on avoiding losses prevention goals.
Why is that?
Promotion goals tap into our natural approach motivation. They feel more positive, more engaging, which helps sustain effort. Prevention goals often rely on avoiding negative feelings, which can be effective short-term, but less energizing long-term.
So frame, stop eating junk food as start enjoying healthy, energizing meals.
Exactly. Reframe the negative avoidance into a positive approach. And of course, actively rewarding progress is huge. Celebrating those milestones, those small wins we get from breaking goals down, provides that frequent positive reinforcement that keeps motivation high. You can consciously build rewards into your plan.
Makes sense. Focus on the gains, celebrate the steps. Now, for many big goals, consistency is key. Doing the same thing over and over, relying on willpower for that every single time sounds exhausting.
Totally unsustainable for most of us. That's where habit formation becomes your best friend.
Making it automatic.
Exactly. The goal is to automate those supportive behaviors so they happen almost on autopilot, requiring minimal conscious effort or willpower. Habits are these ingrained patterns, triggered by cues, built through repetition and reward. They run in the background, freeing up your mental energy.
The habit loop, right? Cue, routine, reward.
That's the one. Understanding that loop lets you consciously design habits. So, strategies. First, identify small, repeatable actions that move you toward your goal. Link this back to breaking goals down.
Okay.
Second, link the new action to an existing routine. This is called habit stacking. After I brush my teeth, existing cue, I will do 10 push-ups. New routine.
Piggybacking on existing habits. Clever.
Third, manipulate your environment. Make the cues for good habits obvious. Make cues for bad habits invisible. Put your running shoes by the door. Hide the cookies.
Choice architecture again.
Yep. And fourth, make sure there's a reward. It can be intrinsic, feeling good after exercise, or extrinsic, allowing yourself that coffee after meditating. The reward locks in the loop.
So it's about becoming a deliberate designer of our own routines. I like habit stacking. Okay, but what about those tasks that just aren't fun? The shoulds that we know are good for us, but we dread doing.
Ah, yes, the necessary evils. For those, there's a brilliant strategy called temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. Tell me more.
It's from Catherine Miltman's research. It tackles that conflict between what feels good now, the want, and what's good for us later, the shoulds.
Okay. Ow.
You bundle them. You only allow yourself to indulge in the want activity while you are doing the should activity. The want becomes contingent on the should.
So the reward is simultaneous with the chore.
Exactly. The enjoyable want acts as an immediate reward for doing the less enjoyable should. It counteracts present bias because you get the reward right away. It makes the should less reliant on pure willpower.
Give me examples.
Only listening to your favorite podcast or audiobook while you're exercising? Only watching that trashy TV show you love while you're folding laundry or doing ironing? Only getting that fancy coffee when you're processing your work emails?
Huh. That's smart. Does it actually work?
Research shows it does, especially for kickstarting behaviors. Milkman's study had people get access to tempting audio novels only when they went to the gym visits. Went up significantly. People were even willing to pay to keep the bundle going. It's a great way to get over the initial hump, though long-term you might still want to build intrinsic motivation or solid habits too.
Cool technique. Okay, one more strategy for sticking with it. What about locking ourselves in, making it harder to back out?
That's the idea behind commitment devices. These are tools or strategies you voluntarily choose to basically lock yourself into your intended action. They make it harder or more costly to give in to temptation later.
So my rational planner self outsmarts my impulsive doer self.
That's the psychological model, exactly. They work through several mechanisms. Pre-commitment, making the decision when you're rational, loss aversion, creating a cost for failure, countering present bias, leveraging social pressure, anticipating regret.
What do these look like in practice?
Could be financial contracts, like using a service like Stick Hack where you put money down that you lose if you don't meet your goal. Publicly announcing your goal makes you accountable to others. Using website blocking software. Scheduling appointments you feel obligated to attend. Setting deadlines with real penalties if you miss them.
Do they work? And do people actually use them?
They've been shown to be effective in health, finance, work contexts. But uptake can be low. People hesitate to constrain themselves, and there's a risk of just forfeiting the penalty, which isn't ideal. Choosing the right device for you, one that feels binding but not impossible, is key. And it has to be voluntary. Interestingly, sometimes soft commitments, like appointments, work better than money, maybe because of the social aspect.
So creating external structures to bolster our internal resolve. Okay, we've spent a lot of time on our internal world goals, biases, habits, but we don't live in a vacuum, right? Our environment, the people around us, they matter too.
Hugely. We're embedded in this whole ecosystem that constantly shapes us, and a key part of navigating that is, again, monitoring progress effectively. We need feedback. We need self-monitoring to know if we're adapting correctly within that ecosystem.
Okay, we talked about feedback needing to be specific, timely. What else makes feedback truly effective in this broader context?
Focusing on effort, process, and growth is really important. It reinforces that growth mindset we'll talk about. The balance between positive and negative feedback matters, maybe more positive reinforcement for beginners, while experts might respond better to critical feedback pointing out specific flaws.
Interesting.
And the source matters. Feedback from someone credible, someone you trust, delivered constructively that lands much better. Technique-wise, visual aids are great charts. Progress bars provide that immediate feedback. Regular self-monitoring, like journaling or checklists, boosts self-awareness. But crucially, that self-monitoring needs to be paired with self-reflection.
Just tracking isn't enough.
No. You need to ask why. Why did I perform well this week? Why did I fall short? Understanding the reasons allows you to actually adapt your strategies intelligently. It's a metacognitive skill.
Okay, active reflection on the data. Now let's talk environment. Physical space, digital space.
Yeah.
How do we design these surroundings to help us, not hinder us?
This brings us back to choice architecture and nudges. The way our environment is set up influences our choices constantly, often unconsciously. Choice architecture is about intentionally designing those environments to make good choices easier. Nudges are those subtle pushes in the right direction. And the cool thing is, you can be your own choice architect.
How? What's the mechanism?
It's often about managing friction or activation energy, making the desired action incredibly easy to start, and making the undesired action harder. Our brains love the path of least resistance.
Give me some concrete examples. How can I nudge myself?
Okay, health goals. Food, put fruit in a bowl on the counter. Hide the chips in a high cupboard. Use smaller plates. Keep a water bottle always filled. Exercise, lay out your workout clothes the night before. Pack your gym bag and leave it by the door. Schedule workouts in your calendar like meetings.
Reducing friction. Got it. What about learning?
Physical space. Create a dedicated, quiet study area. Organize your materials so they're easy to find. Digital space. Prioritize learning apps on your phone screen. Use website blockers for distractions during study time. Curate your social media feeds. Set digital reminders. Put sticky notes with key concepts where you'll see them.
And productivity.
Workspace, clean desk, tools within easy reach, maybe visual aids like a Kanban board, ergonomic setup, digital.organized files, efficient email system, turn off unnecessary notifications. Routine.time locking, using if-then plans for common distractions. If I feel the urge to check email, then I will finish this paragraph first.
So it's about making the good choice the easy, obvious choice.
Exactly. Setting beneficial defaults,
Mhm.
simplifying things, increasing the hassle factor for bad choices. And it's personal. Figure out your troubles and temptations, then design around them.
Love that. Okay, last piece of the ecosystem.
Hmm.
People. Social connections, accountability, norms. How does our social world influence goal success?
It's profoundly important. Let's start with accountability partners.
Having someone check in on you?
Yes, it boosts commitment and motivation just knowing someone else is aware and expects an update. They provide encouragement, feedback.
Who makes a good accountability partner? Not my spouse, who will let me off the hook.
Huh, maybe not. Look for someone reliable, honest, but supportive, a good communicator, positive, constructive. Sometimes someone slightly removed works better because they can be more objective. Key is to structure it. Define the goals clearly. SMART works well here. Set a regular check-in schedule. Agree on how they'll support you. Set boundaries.
And beyond one partner.
Broader social support matters too. Your network provides encouragement, maybe resources, different perspectives, and then there are social norms.
The unwritten rules of the group.
Exactly. We can leverage these. We're influenced by what we perceive others are doing, descriptive norms, and what we think others approve or disapprove of, injunctive norms.
How do we use that?
By making the behaviors you want to adopt seem common or socially desirable within your relevant groups, people naturally compare themselves and tend to conform. So highlighting positive norms works. Think about savings campaigns showing how many people are saving, or anti-smoking ads emphasizing disapproval. Publicly committing to a goal taps into this. Joining groups where the desired behavior is the norm is powerful.
So, plugging into our need for connection and belonging.
Precisely. And it works best when the group is one you identify with and value.
Okay, so harnessing social forces is key. Now let's face it, even with all these strategies, things go wrong. We hit roadblocks, we fail sometimes. How do we handle setbacks adaptively?
This is where flexibility and resilience come in. And sometimes the most adaptive thing to do is actually to disengage from a goal.
Give up. Isn't that failure?
Not necessarily. Goal disengagement means reducing effort and psychological commitment when a goal truly becomes unattainable. It's not failure in a negative sense. It's an adaptive strategy to stop wasting resources and prevent the negative psychological fallout of banging your head against a brick wall. It frees you up.
Okay. Frees you up for what?
For goal re-engagement. That's the crucial second part. Identifying and committing to new goals that are feasible and meaningful, ideally linked to your core values. Finding those meaningful alternatives is key to maintaining purpose and well-being after letting go of an old goal.
So it's about knowing when to hold them, know when to fold them, and know when to pick a new game.
Exactly. People vary in how well they do this. Psychologists talk about flexible goal adjustment, FGA, the ability to adaptively pursue, modify, and yes, sometimes abandon goals. Smart disengagement protects your mental health.
Okay, that's important for those big, potentially impossible goals. But what about the everyday slip-ups? The minor setbacks that are just part of the journey? How do we learn from those and keep going?
That comes down heavily to mindset. Specifically, cultivating a growth mindset.
Carol Dweck's work, fixed versus growth.
That's the one. A fixed mindset assumes your abilities are innate, carved in stone. A growth mindset believes abilities can be developed through dedication, effort, learning.
And that changes how you see setbacks.
Fundamentally, with a growth mindset, a setback isn't proof you're not good enough. It's information. It's a learning opportunity. Effort isn't something you need if you're talented. Effort is the path to getting better. Challenges aren't threats, they're chances to grow. This reframing totally changes your emotional response and your motivation to persist.
So how do we nurture that growth mindset in ourselves?
Focus on effort and strategy, not just outcomes or innate talent. Praise your own persistence, the strategies you tried, what you learned, not just I succeeded or I failed.
Value the process.
Yes. Actively seek feedback, viewing it as data for improvement, not judgment. Embrace challenges, reframe difficulty as, okay, this is where the learning happens. Use goal frameworks that allow for flexibility and adjustment. Learning from mistakes and adapting your approach is active self-regulation. It's a skill that gets stronger with practice. A growth mindset makes the whole journey of goal pursuit less stressful and way more likely to lead to long-term success because you become more resilient.
This has been incredibly rich. So much practical, science-backed insight. Let's try to quickly wrap up the core message for everyone listening.
I think the main takeaway is that behavioral science gives us this powerful evidence-based toolkit. We can move beyond vague advice like just try harder to understand the actual psychological and cognitive levers we can pull.
Right.
We've covered a lot from why goals work based on theories like Locke and Latham's to practical frameworks like SMART and WOOP,
Understanding and navigating our own cognitive biases.
strategies for reinforcement, habit formation, temptation bundling, commitment devices.
Leveraging our environment and social networks.
And finally, the absolute necessity of adaptability, knowing when to disengage, and cultivating that resilient growth mindset.
So the bottom line is, by understanding this science, we can stop being passive passengers and become active architects of our own goals and progress.
Exactly. The power lies in understanding these mechanisms. It empowers you, the listener, to be much more intentional and hopefully much more effective in shaping the future you want.
Fantastic. And maybe a final thought for everyone to chew on. As you reflect on everything we've discussed, try to pick out just one key insight or strategy that really clicked for you today. Just one thing. And then ask yourself, how could I apply that one thing to a goal I'm working on right now, maybe even today? Because ultimately, understanding the science of our own behavior might just be the biggest leap we can take towards achieving the things that truly matter to us.